by Uyanda from the SOS, which used to be Save Our SABC, but I think has got another longer title now. Let me just, yeah. So, yeah, Uyanda Chula is the National Coordinator of the SOS Support Public Broadcasting Coalition, and it's a member-based civil society formation representing a broad constituency committed to the strengthening and advancement of public service media in the public interest, which I think says it all, isn't it? The SOS, by the way, is, I think, one of the organizations that kept Claudio Motsuneng from destroying the SABC forever and making it a state broadcaster, not a public broadcaster. So we owe a lot to the SOS. I hand it over to you. It's on? Yeah. Take it away.
So what we do, the broad work that we do as SOS, we do a lot of advocacy work, we do lobbying, particularly with one of our main stakeholders, the SABC, obviously, because most of our work does revolve around the SABC, but we also advocate and lobby with Parliament, government, the department, and other stakeholders as well. Our work really just revolves around ensuring that there is proper legislation, policy and regulation to ensure that the SABC has got a conducive environment to thrive and be a success, and most importantly, fulfill its mandate. We also do a lot of campaign work, which is something that really we've kind of strengthened over the last year. We do research and litigation as well, and research really is going to be the most part of this presentation today. Public service media sustainability is such a big problem. It is, in fact, a global problem. Like many media entities, the SABC and other public service media organizations are not immune to, the struggle, the sustainability struggle, especially with the move to online that has, left a lot of broadcasters without significant audiences to ensure that they become sustainable. And we know that the SABC over the years has been undergoing a financial crisis, for decades, in fact. But I think we know, most recently, one of the biggest contributors to that financial crisis has been the premature switch off of the analog signal, where the SABC lost about 40% of its audience. We've also seen, issues around, the poor legislation actually impacting the SABC's sustainability. But most importantly, there's also the issue of the funding model. Yes, the SABC has a funding model, but it's not viable. It's not working for the benefit of the SABC. And recently, I think about a week ago, the SABC presented its annual report before Parliament. And again, we're still seeing the SABC continuing to experience a loss. This time around, they lost about 500 million, which is a significant improvement from the 1 billion, in the previous year. However, we need to get to a point where the SABC is sustainable and there are no longer losses, but there's revenue generation. And again, the issue of the analog switch off, we know that, government wants to switch off at the end of the year. And if that does happen, the SABC has projected a 20% loss of a further audience base. And again, in this report, what we've picked up was the fact that there is an 86% invasion, for the television license. A lot of people are not paying the television license. Last year, it was 84, so there's now a 14%, there's a 2% increase, which means only 14% of people are actually paying their TV licenses. And the public broadcast has got such an important mandate that needs money in order for it to be fulfilled. We can't expect the SABC to be viable and to fulfill its mandate without a proper financial injection. So, and in fact, in the SABC's words, the public mandate is extremely expensive. So obviously there is money that's required. So what SOS did, because we really do want to see the public broadcaster become more sustainable, early this year we launched we commissioned a research, and we had, very important and researchers actually work on this, experts in the field. We had Viola Milton, we had Khutato Mampa, as well as Michael Markovitz, who's here today. I'm not sure if Khutato is here, but I thought he would be, but anyway. Yeah, so they really did amazing work for us, and they were looking globally at what public service media, at the state of public service media, the global trends, just so that we're able to take some lessons that we can then come and use to actually advance public service media in South Africa. So the purpose of this research is to develop a knowledge base and signpost the way for further work on sustainability strategies and mechanisms of the SABC. But we're also hoping that it can serve as a broader, as a conversation starter, for issues around policy, legislation, and regulation. And I think the most amazing thing about this research is that anyone can actually take some of our recommendations and conduct further research on those aspects, because we do want, this realization that the SABC is a public broadcaster and everyone has got, a liability to ensure that they do contribute to the SABC. So we encourage all organizations that actually have an interest to, conduct further research on any of the recommendations. Hopefully Parliament, government, the SABC can also be part of those organizations. So the issue of sustainability when it comes to the public broadcaster in the discussion document is divided into 3 aspects. So the first one is social sustainability, the second is institutional sustainability, and the last one is financial sustainability, which is obviously the most important. But I do want to briefly touch on the other 2. So with social sustainability, it is important that a public broadcaster is understood in society, that people know what its role is, can relate to it, and they see its value. Because without that, you will constantly continue to lose audiences, even if there is financial sustainability. So I think what I'm also trying to highlight is that all these aspects are actually interlinked and interdependent on each other. So, one of the ways of doing that is ensuring that there is relationship building between the public broadcaster as well as its audience, that there are public participation, mechanisms, and people have access to the SABC. Because then they can relate to it, they can actually influence decision-making and processes. And then the institutional aspect really speaks to regulation, proper and adequate regulation that is needed in order for the SABC to, be a properly functioning institution. And we know that the SABC is currently before Parliament, and as SOS and, with other civil society organizations, Media Monitoring Africa and SANEF, recently we presented before Parliament on, the major concerns with this particular bill, because, one of the recommendations, in fact, in the report is that the legislative framework needs to be fixed. And those are the things that we're saying, and we're just unpicking the problems about the SABC bill. And that legislation is needed, but now it's going ahead in the absence of a policy vacuum, and those are the things that, need to actually, be fixed in order for the SABC to adequately, be a proper institution. And one of the key issues we actually have with the SABC bill is the fact that there is no funding model. So there's no funding model. The minister is given 3 years to come up with, a model not even a funding model. So these are the key issues, and I think it's really important as we speak about the various options for the financial sustainability of the SABC. And that takes me to my third point, which is the financial sustainability. So if the SABC has no funding model, I mean, it's got a funding model, and the funding model is a mixed funding model. So there's different, mechanisms or sources of revenue. However, the world has changed. We've now moved to the digital space, and the legislation doesn't take into consideration the new and various ways in which the SABC could actually be funded. So regarding financial sustainability, so the document actually proposes a couple of options that can be considered as we look at updating the SABC funding model. So one is direct state funding. So I don't know if we missed out on an opportunity, because the ANC in its policies says that the SABC's annual budget needs to be funded, at least 60% of it needs to be funded by the state. However, obviously that was not implemented. And now we've got the GNU, so obviously now, it's a whole different, beast altogether. But I think that was really important, because if you look around the world, there are public broadcasters that are funded mostly by the state, such as your ABC. However, I think the only problem with, the biggest problem, in fact, with the SABC is that government only funds about 3% of, its annual budget. So if you compare that to the 60% that was initially the goal, there's a huge gap. I mean, we do, as well as SOS, want to see government putting more money into the SABC, because it is a public broadcaster. It's the people of South Africa that actually benefit from it. So that's one consideration that is proposed in the report. There's also the Indigenous Content Fund, and we know that content is obviously one of the biggest investments at the SABC. That's where most of the money also goes. So obviously, if there is an Indigenous Content Fund that seeks to support local content, I have one more slide that seeks to support local content. That way, you then get the SABC benefiting from that fund. It's not going to be for the SABC only, but the SABC will significantly benefit, because it is a public broadcaster and does, produce local content. And I think that would be very important to ensure that it actually does meet its local content quotas. And then you've got the license fees, and I'll try and pace it up. You've got the license fees that haven't been working for more than 2 decades now. And the proposal in the discussion document is that there is an adoption of a public media levy, and that public media levy, I think one of the biggest issues with the license fees was the collection method, because people can only pay when they buy a television set, and they can pay a once-off fee and disappear because the television doesn't stop working, so they continue to have access to information. So the public media levy, the suggestion is that it's not linked to the purchase or the usage of technology. That means everyone, whether or not you've got a television set, you can actually be able to, you are liable to pay the fee, so which obviously makes sure that there are a lot more people who pay. But the other thing is a collection method, that there is a need to overhaul the collection method. There's various ways that are proposed that I won't get into now because of time. But obviously what has been, the current collection method has proven not to work. The SABC, in terms of the SABC News funding, as I wrap up, National Journalism Fund, there was a proposal about the National Journalism Fund, which speaks to compensation of journalism as a public good. So that fund would only cater for public interest news. And obviously the SABC, being the carrier of that mandate, would be one of the media entities that benefit. And then there was also a process that SOS, SANEF, Media Monitoring Africa, and other organizations in the room, GIBS, that were CFE as well, that were part of, where we were arguing, so this was a Competition Commission's Media and Digital Market Inquiry, so where we were actually advocating for platforms to pay a particular fee to newsmakers, because newsmakers use these platforms to obviously, reach their audiences, but then they don't benefit. The financial benefit goes to the platforms. So there's a whole lot of other, avenues, and some of them we won't get to them today. I think I've just highlighted the most important that, need to be taken into consideration. And I know that the SABC has also proposed some, various ways in which, they think they could be better funded. So this is literally the document. So in conclusion, I think I just want to say that the SABC bill, we think it's really, really fundamental. I think that's why we've been, advocating so much. Just ensuring that it actually does become a credible legislation. That's our biggest problem. Hopefully, government is listening and Parliament is listening. And we want it to contain a new funding model that takes into consideration some of these options and more. And we want government to conduct even more research, enrich, other sources that, because of limited time and resources, we are not able to tap into. The research document can be downloaded on our website. Which I've put here, but also you can scan this QR code and download it right away, please. I think, thank you very much. I think I just want to leave you with one word, that the public broadcaster is ours, and we need to play our part in advancing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uyanda. So we're now moving into the second part of the discussions. We've got three people here who are intimately involved with actual publishing. They're at the coalface. And we're going to ask each of them for, very practical questions about news organizations. While I was standing outside, I just want to get this, I'll try and remember it. I realized we were at the Goethe Institute, and I remember a quote from Johannes Wolfgang von Goethe, which is, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius and magic in it. And so we're going to talk first to one of the people who has shown boldness, which is Rob Rose. Rob is a very well-known financial journalist. If you don't know who he is, then you haven't been reading the newspapers. And he's going to tell us in 15 minutes about this new currency publication that he's launched, a new financial publication. It is currencynews.coza. It's digital only. And like another, like a lot of digital platforms, it has a porous. Is the paywall up already? Okay, so yeah, it's got a porous paywall. You get 5 free articles, and then you ask to subscribe. So the questions I wanted to pose to Rob was, why on earth did he do this? That's the first thing. Secondly, how does he think it's going to be sustainable? What's the business model? And perhaps, what is your USP? What makes you different from everybody else out there? And how are you going to survive in this? And this is a question for all of you. How do you survive in this new attention economy where if you go online, I sometimes think no one can hear you scream, but when you go online, you're competing with all sorts of distractions, including cat videos. I mean, I love cat videos, so, but this is the reality. You're competing with other news organizations in the country, news organizations outside the country, with broadcasters who put stuff out for free. And this is just in the news arena. So that's the question for you, Rob. How are you going to do it?
Should I sit here? Is this? Yeah, well, we all came from, the people who part of Currency came primarily from Financial Mail, which is where we used to work, and Bloomberg News, and we tried to buy Financial Mail. We thought it was a good thing to do because being in the legacy media organizations, what you saw for many years, as you've seen everywhere, is a huge diminishment of resources and cost cuts and retrenchments for years, which I think really, compromised the ability of these publications to provide value to the readers. And I think ultimately that's what you're judged on. So I saw at Financial Mail, where I was, that it was becoming harder and harder to do the job of providing actual intelligence. So we thought, well, let's buy Financial Mail, let's make it work. We know what the holes are in the system better than the people who are running organizations. And I think that the existing publishers have a hard time, partly because of where they come from, but also because a large part of their income and their revenue goes towards supporting these giant metropolises they built. Whereas, one of the points that Stilly and Daily Maverick have made always is that the money you collect, you should spend mostly on the output, mostly on the journalism. So if we reconfigured the organization and did that, as opposed to paying, certainly, buying paper and putting it out on the streets and distributing it, that saves a whole lot more of your money. You can actually spend the money providing value to your readers. So what we thought is we had a good group of journalists who've broken some big stories. Anne Crotty and Julieta and Vernon Vessels and others who are part of it and are joining it and are working on it. And I think that what we wanted to do is take that space of providing intelligence for the business sector. That was pretty much it. There's so much information out there that you don't just want to provide information, you want to actually provide the intelligence. So that was our starting point. So what we plan to do is, obviously, for the guys who've seen it, it's business news primarily, but we also have another part which we were quite keen to get going on, which was the non-profit side of it, which was focusing on business investigations, and that's the kind of things like Steinhoff, like Tongart, like, Rick van Niekerk's really keen on the kind of forex scams, on the kind of things that people are being duped in every day. I think that's the kind of thing that we can play a big role in. The other part of the non-profit side is financial literacy. We have 51% financial literacy in this country. It's massive. And I think that there's a strong case to be made for addressing that on social media and addressing that and certainly lots of youth platforms with innovative data, audio, and visuals. And there's ways to do it smarter than has been done with a team that I think understands how the economy works. What we said is, our whole kind of motif, to use a really pretentious word, is, we called it currency because people want the skills to understand the economics of their world, right? But they don't have those skills primarily. So we want to give people the skills to understand it and hopefully in that way boost their, it sounds terrible when I say it now, but to boost their personal currency. People want to find out how to make a success of their lives and understand business. At Financial Mail, one of the best stories, most read stories we had over the last couple of years was how We Buy Cars went from a 4 million rand business in someone's garage to a 32 billion rand company. And that was hugely read. And I didn't understand at the time, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but people want to know, how can I make a success of my life? How can I do this kind of thing? And I think that those stories often aren't told, giving people these kind of actual utilitarian skills in the business world to do that. So that's part of it. And then the third element of our non-profit side would be financial training for journalists. I feel that, when I started writing about business, there was Sunderland Winter School, there was Arena where I worked had a graduate trainee program. News 24 had one, and all you've seen of those programs just get culled because it costs a lot to do it. And I think that that's a really key part of it. And then we graduate people into the businesses, into the business sectors, and work a lot with. We've worked in the past couple of months with the Amplify cohort and a lot of independent media. There's some great journalists out there. There's some great media organizations, independent media organizations that you can partner with and share content and provide the stuff you do to other small independent media organizations, and they can do the same. And we can share skills to a far greater extent than we've done. I think the fact that Stilly is our business coach for a long time is, that theoretically you could say, well, Daily Maverick's a competitor, but I think the level of, generosity from organizations like that who want the media to succeed is fantastic. So we launched 2 weeks ago. We've had a couple of hundred people so far signing up, subscribing, and taking a year-long subscription. We've had a couple of advertisers who we pitched the idea to and said, look, we think it's very important that you have this kind of stuff done well, because the alternative is independent media, the Star newspaper, writing trillions lost in rand fixing on the front page, which is just a blatant fiction. They don't understand what they don't understand. And that kind of level of complete illiteracy is getting sold in the absence of organizations who do know what they're talking about to millions of people. And I think that we need to address that. So I think the organizations, the advertisers, saw the need for such a thing. And so we've had a couple of advertisers pitch up from the outset and say to us months ago, sure, we'll give you some money, and it'll help you get going. And so the goodwill from that side has been has been impressive. We just have to navigate the conflicts of interest around that, or just pretend they don't exist. That's the alternative. So that pretty much is what we've done so far. It's been, I was saying to Gillian earlier, I think it's actually easier to start a new publication at the moment because the level of goodwill from people in this room, I think from society, from companies, and from readers is immense. It's harder once you're an established media company. You've been doing it for a number of years, and you have to confront the economics of the situation in a far more mature way. It's a lot harder, I think, in that position. I think that's why I do feel sympathy with the, the places I used to work at, the big media houses.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that digital disruption, which we always see as a threat, can actually present really good opportunities for new, independent, innovative journalists. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's just a delivery mechanism. So digital is a delivery mechanism. I think a lot of people read their news on phones now. They don't read it in print. I love print, but that's just, your news is still getting out there, and I still love print, but I just think the economics are very punishing in this country for that. And rather have more journalists out there speaking to people, doing interviews, providing value to the audience, than spending it on printing papers and providing no value. So I think ultimately that's a compromise you have to make. I'd obviously prefer to have, running a print publication that's out there, providing a New Yorker-style quality, but I just don't think at the moment, in the past couple of years, that's been feasible. I think the GNU has changed things to some extent for the sentiment, but it's still quite difficult.
Yeah. It's interesting you mention the legacy publications. We have the Daily Maverick is the only online publication that's actually started a newspaper recently, and actually made quite a success of it. It's an interesting business, the decline of newspapers. But what about the audience? How are you gauging what the audience needs? I mean, this is always a big question for me. What is your connection to the audience? Is it just instinct, as it always used to be for journalists, or do you have any kind of market research, or are you asking because this digital, obviously, are you gauging what the audience wants from the numbers, which are quite, or are you asking people? I mean, this is the thing for me. We always forget, not always, but there's a tendency in looking at media sustainability to look at the money, but not the key thing is where's the audience, So how do you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I suppose we use all the metrics that you have. You have the various readership stats you use. I've spoken to various people about specific audience programs that deliver you greater audiences. I'm just a little wary of that as a journalist, of those kind of things, using black magic to kind of magic up new audiences for yourself that are basically bots from Russia. I don't know if that's fantastic. I mean, I do think it's got a place, obviously. Would never diminish it. I think we should all do it, actually. When I leave here, I'm going to research that.
That's
but I think that's, reading one of the recent reports, if I forget about it, talked about the fact that circulation, I suppose, and readership has gone down in some publications because they're not addressing what the reader wants to know, providing usable utilitarian information, providing intelligence, providing something to take away from it. I think that there's a lot of, in the business press especially, articles that are rehashing yesterday's stock exchange announcement, providing no extra value. And that's the business that is going to get killed by AI. There's no reason to read an article about yesterday's announcement with zero added value. Do you take it forward? Do you interview somebody? Do you tell me something I don't know? I think that is the fact that there are so many organizations just doing that, wrote and not even thinking about it because this one is working, and not thinking about in 2 weeks' time you'll have lost those readers because they'll have seen that there's zero value. That's the dangerous part of it.
You're right, and there never was a golden era, because that kind of, particularly in business journalism, has been around for a long time. Take the stock exchange news service and just rewrite it slightly and get some comment, particularly because they're advertising with you. Yeah, that's. What do you think of? There seems to be quite a few business publications online. Some of them quite successful. Business Tech, for instance. Are these your competitor? And MoneyWeb? Are these your competitors?
To some extent. Some of them have a model where it's primarily to get as many articles up as possible, and to, I wouldn't say clickbaity, but a lot of it is very clickbaity. I think if you work harder to provide the real, it sounds like a cliche, and I keep saying this point, but if you work harder to provide the real value, to provide the, get to the core message of it all. You'll have a better product that people appreciate. People, as you say, are switching on to watching cat videos. So you don't want to interrupt their cat video time. You've got to give them something useful for that 5 minutes. So rather than scanning through a website where there's a whole lot of boring stuff, where nothing really attracts you, where you read an article and you think, well, why did I do that? That's 2 minutes of my life gone. Make sure that the value you do give, the articles you do provide, meet that quotient. I think that's the trick.
And I see you've got a newsletter, so that is obviously something that we all have to think about. It's other means of reaching audiences. Do you find that, I mean, the big thing in the past was reaching audiences online through social media. Do you think that's a viable option, or is that gone now? Are they deprecating links?
I mean, I think it's, I mean, until something better comes along, I think that, I mean, unfortunately, the humble brag palace, which is LinkedIn, is fantastic for business news.
Okay, right.
I think X is the most toxic place in the world. It's despicable. It's just, I don't find anything, and it's even worse with Elon Musk on there occasionally. It's the car crash every day. It's awful. But if you stick to using it as a marketing tool, then I suppose it can get your message out. I think that these are all just, the central thing is you do journalism, you want more people to read it, you want to get the message out. So anything that helps you do that, you'll absolutely embrace until it's proven to be past its prime and not providing value or have other problems with it.
Yeah. One of the things that interests me about what's happened to the media is the way that newsrooms have become centralized in the big areas. So you've often got a newsroom in Cape Town or in Joburg and nowhere else. And we're going to come to local community news in a moment. But so how broadly are you spreading your net? I mean, there's a lot of really interesting business news, say, in the Eastern Cape or, you know, in Mpumalanga, and it's not getting reported. So are you thinking about that, or is, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's been great is, you know, we launched this thing and we've had, I probably speak to about 4 or 5 journalists every week who contact me and say, I want to write for this, which is fabulous. I mean, people I've spoken to, people I've worked with, and from areas of the country where you just don't get the coverage. You know, we obviously wanted to hire a lot more people initially, and economics will always remain a limitation on that. You can't afford, you have to be smart. You can't just you know, hire everyone you want to. But certainly expanding coverage to areas, it's all about storytelling. I think the business news has never been great at storytelling. Yeah. You know, it puts numbers on a page and says, read this is important, you have to. Yeah. And that's no way to speak to an audience. Read us because it's important. I mean, you have to, storytelling is critical, and I think that, you know, the so what of it, why it's important is vital.
Oh, that so what question is so important. I mean, I often look at stories and think, why have you run this? But anyway, another, one of the things I want to make a punt for stories on, not on business success, but business failure. Because I think that often hits small businesses particularly. You know, they enter business with high hopes, and I mean, we are talking about launching new publications. You have to prepare for business failure. Many years ago, a guy called Peter Carruthers wrote a book called How to Crash-Proof Your Business, and it had practical advice about what to do when your business goes under, because his business had gone under and he lost everything. His house, his wife, everything. And I think it's worthwhile looking at, you know, not only the business success, not only the rah-rah stories, but some of the pitfalls, like signing sureties, for instance, which is often the case with people going into business. Have you signed any?
Just 3 this morning. No, but that's so true. I think what you say is so right. I think that the market of stock exchange companies has narrowed vastly. It's halved in 20 years.
That's right.
So the actual news that comes to the traditional news desks has diminished in scope. So we're not telling the stories of half the economy.
Right.
You know, I went to a couple of companies this week who were on the stock exchange, delisted. And, you know, I thought it was an interesting story. What's happened to those companies? Are they making a success of it? Is it a failure? Is it good for the economy? What's happening that we're not seeing now? And I think, you know, conversely, the organizations, the big media companies, they've cut their staff thinking that, oh, well, if it's important, it'll be on the stock exchange news service, and it's not. So you're missing half the business news. And you're also you're telling the stories of the big corporations as opposed to the smaller businesses that really affect people's lives. I think you're missing out on a huge wealth of storytelling and actually information that people want.
Yeah, that's true. And given that fact that, in my view, there's a vast informal economy that isn't even recognized, there's another area that you could cover. So, so you're optimistic, are you? Are you already soaring with your subscriptions? I mean, is the subscription model really the way to go?
So I think, I mean, you know, speaking to various people and reading some of the literature and the economic models around it, if you have, say, 4 specific areas of revenue, if one has a downturn, you have more to protect you. If you have, so now we're looking at revenue from all quarters. So we have advertising, we have subscribers, and I think that the uptake's been really good so far in a couple of weeks. And donations, and then you have events, you have various other things. I think you know, media is a bit of a hustle. But these are all fun things, and I think it's all about getting your message and your message out to society.
Final, very brief question is, when I started in newspaper, even back then, back in the dinosaur age, a lot of people viewed journalism as a place to start working before they went on to do something a bit more lucrative. What has kept you in the game so long?
This was my second career. Anyway, I left the other one. I did law for 10 days,
right.
And this is much better. I mean, it's fantastic. You have the ability to influence things. You know, you influence policymakers. If there's something egregious you see, you report it well. You know, people read it. It gets out there. This is it's a fundamental way. I think the job satisfaction for a journalist is incredible compared to somebody who goes to an office, types in data for Nedbank, or speaks to somebody shouting at you all day. I mean, the level of job satisfaction in journalism and the way in which you can influence society is immense. I love this industry so much, and I think that we're very privileged to have been in it. Sure, the economics are terrible at the moment, but we still have got a career in a really amazing part of the economy. Yeah.
I think the economics were better for the people at the top in the past.
As it always is.
There's almost nobody listed in the media sector of the JSE anymore. Okay. So we touched briefly on, thanks very much, Rob. So we touched briefly on the local versus the national, and I think it is a big problem in thinking about media is that there is a perception that the view from the cities and even from the suburbs always dominates. And it forgets what we're going to be talking about now, the local and the hyperlocal. And I'm really absolutely fascinated, having lived in Grahamstown, which is out there in the Bundus, you know, and had another view of media. I want to go to Shirley Govender now, who's from the AIP, and has in fact run 3 publications, 3 local publications. Hyperlocal, I think, is. So can you tell us from your perspective what makes for success? And is it possible to make the local successful, given that the revenue streams are not great at the local level? In other words, that was the problem that I always heard when I was involved with Grootegeluk Mail, is that the local businesses didn't have that much money to spend on advertising, and the national wasn't. So there was a local Pick and Pay in Grahamstown, but it didn't really spend that much money. I mean, Pick and Pay National didn't spend money. It was the local Pick and Pay. So what is the financial situation of local publications?
Look, I think right now we are all on our knees. I mean, we're in the eye of the storm when it comes to sustainability. I started my first publication in 1992. It was called Southern Globe. And, you know, back then I could sell a 16-page in a day on my own. Now it takes me 2 weeks to sell for one, for whichever publication it is. So the local economy, I specialize in township newspapers. Okay. So we have a whole different ball game. Businesses won't advertise. There's no money. There's a depressed economy. They have their own dynamics. Right. So I have to look out to government, to corporates, and so on, to sustain my publications. Right. There is a fair amount of advertising coming in from the local Orange Farm or Lenasia or wherever, but it's not enough to sustain us. Right. And then we found that in the last, I think, in about 2017, we started feeling the decline in our anchor advertisers, you know, like the Tile Africas and all of that. So they started pulling back. Because if I look at my situation now, I get government ads 4 times a year. Yet, I pride myself on being the person who's informing and educating, helping my readers navigate their lives. Because it's hyper-local. They need to know when the IDP meeting is, or whatever the case may be. And we're running that. We are the cheerleaders for all of this. But so it's really tough right now.
Do you think that there might be the prospect, and I do say this very warily, of direct government funding in some form? Say an independently, independent organization that supplies money to the AIP or to independent, along the lines of the MDDA, shall we say. Do you think there's any, and what about the MDDA?
I'm just so afraid if I say something now, I'm never going to get funded from it.
You don't have to answer that question.
So, Kate Skinner is sitting in the room.
Yeah.
She has done an amazing job unlocking opportunities for us. Right. So, for example, I'm on the 2024 cohort with Amplify SA. Okay. So there's grant funding there in terms of technology or writing. So for me as an independent, I'm grabbing every opportunity to empower my newsroom and my business. Okay. So we need to tie government down. Because like I said, if we're going to be their cheerleaders, then for God's sake, do something, help us. It's my responsibility to inform and educate my readers, but at least come to the party with some kind of support, because we're also nation building. Yes. We're building thriving, resilient communities. We are we're helping them navigate their lives every day. But I mean, we're on our own with that. Yes. So it becomes it's frustrating.
Yes.
So whether it's MDDA, whether it's whoever's, but corporates, your bigger companies.
Yes.
That they need to take responsibility as well.
Yes.
I mean, I'd like to see policy changes at government, at legislation level. We need to start setting up partnerships and collaborations with government. Show them our efforts. Create what's the word? Some kind of thing that's a document that's going to show them that, look, these are the things that we're doing.
Yes, yes.
And get them involved. They can run pilot projects within the smaller newsrooms in the townships.
Yes.
There's so many opportunities that they can step in.
Yes.
I mean, if you want to know how to tile your bathroom, that's what hyper-local newspapers do. We're not looking at the JSC and stuff,
yeah,
but it's relevant, important stuff for my market.
Yes.
So we need them to come in. I mean, if there's anybody in the room that can go out there and say, listen, we've got 150 publications with the Association of Independent Publishers that are we're all in trying to build our communities all over the country, pushing out like 4,000 or 5 million copies a month. That's a lot of newspaper.
That is a lot.
That's a lot of education going out.
Yes, yes.
So all we're saying is, let's look at collaboration, let's look at partnerships, and start engaging in more conversations around this, whether it's a round table, getting everybody together, it's tech companies,
Yes,
or the opportunities are there. They just need to, I mean, we are available to have a conversation. So please come and let's talk about this, because if I mean, this is a media freedom festival. If I were to close my 3 newspapers, Orange Farm News, Walkerville and Savannah City Times, and Globe Post. So we are, the publications, we are the only voices in those communities. How do people make informed decisions? How do we run? We talk about democracy?
Do you think you're giving a voice to the people in those communities? In other
Absolutely, we amplify.
Do they write for you? And okay.
We're amplifying voices. That's what we do.
Okay. Yeah.
So I take a lot of pride in being a local community newspaper publisher.
Right.
It's a heart-centered activity. My newsroom is a sacred space because I'm building communities from the bottom up.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'd really like to have that kind of support.
Yeah. I don't think people realize the importance of local newspapers in the sense of discovering things that can't be done from the center. I just wanted to ask, do you think that what might help you is a kind of a renewed SAPA that that didn't cost money, that might actually provide some copy as a kind of a backup Would that help?
I think there's a huge misconception around copy
Okay.
and advertising.
Yes, yes.
I need advertising to drive my businesses. I need
Right.
advertising to drive strategy. I
Right.
need advertising to drive AI and innovation in my business
Right,
models
right,
and my newsroom. Copy is abundant.
Ah, okay. All right.
Because we are so invested in those communities, we work, we live in those communities. So I have more copy than I need
Right.
at any given time.
Right.
And they're all organic, 95% organic material.
Yeah, yeah. Just something that occurs to me as you're talking. I mean, there's legislation to, and a big, part of the legislation is keeping print and broadcasting separate. If you had access to, say, running a radio station as part of your newspaper, local newspaper group, would that help in getting revenue?
Perhaps yes. I think it's about time that we got together as community media, TV, print, and radio.
Right.
Because together we can command far more attention in terms of our needs.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
And
I mean, it
also,
just,
if I may add,
Yes.
that we need to stop seeing ourselves as competition. That's where the separation happens. So we're all standing in our isolated little spaces, but expecting help. So
But
you're going to
sorry-
get certain sectors getting help, and I'm sitting in Indonesia South, and I'm wondering why on earth am I battling? They've got, I'm doing all this amazing work, but I'm not getting any funding.
Okay. Who's doing this amazing work? Sorry, I just didn't.
My newsroom,
Oh, right.
or as a hyperlocal newspaper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's a fascinating thing. When I was in Grahamstown, I actually saw the decline of Grokot's Mail, and I really couldn't fit. Well, this is an interesting thing. Sometimes management of news media is the key to success or failure. And I mean, what do you think aid can be given to the people like yourself who manage these local newspapers?
Look, for me, pilot projects work very well because you have a focused project. There's funding coming in from that. Then you're accountable on the basics of that project. There's objectives to be met, and that's easy for someone to measure, a sponsor, to measure that project,
Yeah.
and look at and then see the value of my products.
Right.
I think
Rather than sort of funding.
just,
Yeah.
But but we're in real trouble right now.
Okay.
So I
Well, what
don't
keeps you going? Why haven't you done something else?
I think, look, one of the core for me, I get a lot of satisfaction in that one of the core principles in my business is to be putting good out there, to change the world, to inform, to educate.
Yeah.
And that keeps me going. So I'm answering your question. I tend to get lost.
Yeah. No, I am.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
You are.
So I'm sorry. Yeah. So like I said earlier, it's very heart-centered
Yes.
effort, and that's what drives us to keep printing.
Yes.
And to do what we need to do. Our communities, our readers need it.
Yes.
So we are not, if there isn't an enabling environment
Yes.
for us to work in,
Yes.
then what happens to our communities?
Yes.
So we need the freedom, we need the funding
Yeah.
to have the freedom to be able to accomplish our mission and vision in
Yeah.
terms of local information and as community newspapers.
We're talking about geographic communities here.
You're looking at whether it's Orange Farm, whether it's Ennerdale, wherever it may be.
Of course, there's another meaning to community being like Muslim news or whatever.
Yeah. Well, we cater for everything, especially with hyperlocal.
Yeah.
There's no specific, okay, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim,
Okay.
or I'm whoever you may be.
Okay.
You're being serviced by the publication because it's a well, in my case, it's a door-to-door.
Yes. No, it's a fascinating business. Where did you get the startup capital to do
I
this?
didn't.
You didn't.
I started Southern Globe because Lenasia South was, there was so much injustice around that we faced as residents because we were dumped on the deepest south of Joburg
Yeah.
because we were Indian or any non-white, and that's why I started the paper, because we needed a voice. We needed to have accountability. We didn't even have no SABC transmitters, no post office, no police station, one shopping center, and they were like what, 4,000 people. So. Yeah, that's how I was driven to start, because it was an anti-apartheid voice initially, but turned into a water and lights, guard dog, watchdog. That was the initial role. Yeah. So that's how I ended up starting that. Yeah. Just passionate about wanting to make a difference, to change.
Okay. So just finally, I mean, have you got any ideas of something that, as you say, you're on your knees, that might help immediately to get you off?
Look, I've started already.
Okay.
Okay, so apart from the newspapers, for example, we looked at what our advertisers needed. So they needed, for example, printing of your pamphlets weekly.
Okay, right.
So I have a little, I would print pamphlets. I still do. We're printing your A3 inserts. We do the design work. We sometimes publish that in the newspapers. I do branding. On the side, it's not something that happens all the time, but it's something I'm open to innovation. I'm open to new business products. The success to us as hyperlocal papers is to diversify. If you don't, you're dead in the water.
Okay, right.
So that's what I've done. We saw this happening in 2017 already. Okay. So we started a range of products. Okay. So for example, I've got like a portfolio of a retail franchisees where I do their Facebook marketing.
Oh, okay.
So we've got different aspects, but that all came in purely and all started from Southern Globe.
Ah, okay.
You see, and it's the only way it basically cross-subsidizes the newspapers. Right. I can't afford to close those papers.
Yes.
Apart from my own passion, there's emotional attachment.
Right.
So. So there's lots of other little things that we're doing, and all the publishers are doing. We've got some of our publishers are eventing, they do newsletters. Yeah, yeah. So everybody's diversifying and introducing new products, and also with the advent of the digitization. So that's also another revenue stream for the publishers as well. So as I sit here, I'm speaking not just about me, but about the other 150 publishers with the AIP.
Yeah, not only with the AIP, I think everybody has to diversify.
100%.
Though the danger of that is that your third stream income can be so successful that you just forget about the newspaper. So thank you very much. Thanks for that perspective. And I now want to move to Gillian, who is in the Daily Maverick hot seat, a fascinating business model, a fascinating media model in that you have membership, and you have ads, and you have donors as well. So you have 3 streams of income, plus events and whatever else, and books and so forth. So I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is how Daily Maverick came from not entirely nowhere, because I know Branko was running a magazine before he went online, but came from almost nowhere to be in the top, one of the top online publishers in terms of. Sorry, I'm putting myself on it. Yeah. Okay. Don't ever buy a Show Me Redmi phone, by the way. We don't shut off. I'm just got to power it off. Shut up. Go and drown it somewhere. Okay, so so I mean, it's been fascinating for me to see, and my personal perspective is that the magic behind this is not magic; it's audience. What do you think has been the key factor in attracting the audience that you have? And that audience is, some of them prepared to actually donate. Individual. I mean, I was a Daily Maverick member until fairly recently. Nothing to do with the publications. My own cash flow problem. So, what do you think is your unique selling point, if you like? What makes the Daily Maverick different?
Well, I think it's really about the journalism. We put a lot of effort into the kind of journalism that we do. Our journalism has to be relevant. You know, Shirley is talking about helping people navigate life. You know, navigate life is one of those elements that we think about when we're doing our journalism. The other is, how do we protect democracy? And by focusing and being very intentional about what it is that we want to put out into the world, yes, is key in building an audience. They need to find that what you're doing is relevant to their lives, yes, yeah, and adds value. Rob, you spoke about adding value. There's so much out there, you know, and at the end of the day, how do you want your reader to spend time with you is to say, we've got something of value that's going to add value to your life, that's going to help you have that conversation over the beer at the Braai on the weekend and come across as knowing something. You know, Daily Maverick's very much a mission-driven organization. Our mission is to defend truth, and to do that is to help people know more and know better. And so it's been hyper-focused on what it is that we are delivering at the end of the day that helps grow that audience.
Okay. And how much do you think the opinion pieces, the so-called opinionista pieces, how much has that been a part of your success? I mean, that does sort of broaden not only the potential audience, but also the number of people you can tap into. Has that really been essential, or is it just an add-on?
If we go back to the start of Daily Maverick, the opinionista and that kind of section was really how we grew in terms of the amount of content we were putting out. Okay. When we first started, we probably had about 4 journalists and a dog writing for the publication. They were very experienced journalists, but to put out a variety of content, yes, the opinionista section provided that. At the moment, I would say that it's both blessing and a curse, because you know, everybody has an opinion now and wants to put it out. So to be again intentional and triage what it is that you're putting out there can take a lot of drain on the strained resources, but it does allow for a variety of views to come forward. Yeah.
So you've got a much bigger staff now. How does it compare to, say, one of the legacy publishers, given that you also put out a newspaper?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at, unfortunately, we've just gone through a retrenchment process, the first time in 15 years. It wasn't an easy decision to take, but even in that environment, we are sitting with about 35 journalists that are writing for Daily Maverick. That's across from an intern to somebody with over 30 years of experience. And so I think if one looks at the newsrooms of legacy newspapers, you would say that Daily Maverick and News 24 are amongst the biggest in that regard.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, News 24 has got a massive online audience. It dwarfs everybody else. But
our online journalists write for the paper as well. There isn't a specific newsroom for the paper itself.
Yes, yeah, that's quite common. Though I recently read of a publication, I think, in Australia, which actually split the newsroom from online only, or online and print, into 2 separate newsrooms to give them better focus. So maybe you'll think of that in the future. So, I mean, the newspaper is very successful in the sense that it's one of the only newspapers actually increased circulation. Do you? Is it profitable?
We haven't made a profit yet. Okay. We are hopeful that we will get there, at least break even at some point in the very soon future. It's showing that it's serving a reader need for something that is meaty, that gives pause during the week, that takes you away from the screen. Yes. I think it's a highly curated product of excellent journalism. Yes. That allows people some time away from the screen and sit and engage with something that is adding value.
It's got good crosswords, I must say. So as I say, it's about the audience. Now, I'll ask you the same question I asked Rob. Gauging audience, you use all the tools available, but I think Rob made a very important point, instinct as a journalist. You know, how much do you pay? You know, so if you're as a journalist, I mean, most of us went into the business because we wanted to say something. In my time, it's because we wanted to say apartheid was bad, among other things. But you also have to cater for what the audience needs. How do you get that balance, what the audience wants? So the audience might want lots of sport, and you might want to tell them something very important about the economy. How do you get that in your head? How do you balance that?
So we've got a strategy document called Securing Our Future. And one of the arms of securing our future is doing data right. And that's not data for clicks and the like. It's understanding what the data is telling us about the journalism that we're doing, about the audience, about how they're engaging with it, about where we need to present the journalism, not to tell us what we should be doing, but how to reach them. Okay. I think data is there for us to use to improve our accessibility of our journalism. You know, we can write a 10,000-word investigative piece that is going to set the world alight, that will change things, that will move the needle. But if it's not been read, what is the point? Right. You know, so yes, do the 10,000 piece, but actually our audience is saying, we want to see something in video, you know. Let's create a product that will reach that particular audience. If you want to move the needle, you have to make your journalism accessible to people where they are, not where you are.
Have you experimented with video? I mean, it's one of the bright new shiny things that people have talked about some years ago. It would save the media, sort of, you know, going to video online as well as having print. Have you experimented with video? I can't remember.
We have. It's actually quite a new sort of line for us that is showing really good promise. We initially started with the very sort of short YouTube videos. They did well. But we've sort of found a sweet spot between 8 and 15 minutes of mini documentaries around particular stories that audience is really lapping up in a big way. Now it's to find a way to fund that and to draw in the advertising for it to keep it going. And as always, it's done with very stretched resources.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the theme for all newsrooms now, is stretched resources. They never were great in the past, but they're even worse now. Okay. So what I want to do is, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is obviously I want to give a chance to the audience to actually ask questions of our panelists now. Let's do that. Have we got a roving mic? Okay, there's one there. Have we got a roving mic, or you can... Roving mic? It's coming.
Hi, thanks. It's Paul. Sorry about that. Hi, it's Paul. I've got an observation and then a spitball type question. The observation is, prior to COVID, my local newspaper, I live at the beach in Jeffreys Bay, so we had one of the regionals, as the large media houses call them. That publication had one full-time equivalent person performing journalism functions. The editor was the writer of 70% of stories, and the other 30% was kind of a little bit of freelance here and there. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one full-time equivalent performing journalism function and 4 members of staff in the commercial, trying to get advertisers, and so on and so forth. That struck me as a major problem, even if you consider access to, effectively a press syndication, because it's in the Media 24 group. I don't understand how we can get good community news, and whether we're talking about an area-defined community or an interest-defined community, or however one wants to define community. If the ratio of people performing an actual journalistic function and the number of people performing an actual editorial function, which I do think it's important to separate those two things. There is a difference between writing a story and making a call as to newsworthiness. If that ratio is wrong, I cannot see us getting out of a vicious cycle in which a community newspaper or regional, or however it's called, is just put into an absolute trap. Because even if you can, by having 4 members of staff, get the local businesses to sponsor, it can't work. And similarly, a few years ago, after its acquisition by Rhodes University, Grocot's was put in the perilous position of its newsroom largely serving the interests of the university.
It is.
And again, that raises the question of whether or not there is an adequate regard for the number of full-time equivalent performance of a journalistic function versus any sort of business interests, or say not business interests, but generating revenue, you know, that side of it. The spitball that I'm wanting to put forward is, would it be in any way conceivable to, instead of trying to relaunch the wire service type mechanism that was SAPA, to actually have almost a advertorial wire, you know, in other words, a mechanism by which community publications and so on can basically feed in adverts into their platform. I mean, Google has made good money out of AdSense, so I mean, that side of it fits in. But with the added benefit of being able to upstream local news, because hyperlocal news isn't just of interest to people in that locality. I mean, I haven't lived in Grahamstown in years, but hyperlocal news articles and news interest in Grahamstown is of interest to me. And really well-written local stories are well-read by, you know, outside of the context. So that's the spitball. And the complaint that I want to make is Grahamstown is not rural. It's a buzzing metropolitan.
Yes, that's what we thought, yes. Yeah. So, well, surely, I mean, so that's the question. Do you need all these other people to get the revenue, do the ads and whatever? What is your perspective?
Oh, really? That would be my ideal world.
That you don't have those?
No, we can't.
Yeah.
We can't afford it.
Yeah.
So it's not unusual, and it's been like that for the last, God knows how many decades, that all these little community newsrooms, everybody did everything.
Okay, yes.
It is not unusual. It's normal practice, purely because of the expenses. Unless you're a Media 24 or a Caxton, then you can have specialized. I mean, we've got somebody who's doing graphic designing, and if there's an accident down the road, everybody gets into the off go. It doesn't matter what you're doing in the office, or your job title. Yeah. But that's the excitement about having our kind of media. I get what you're saying, focused attention and all of that. But it works for us. It's been working for me for 32 years.
Okay. On the you know, the business mechanics of a newspaper are different from online. So the thing about newspapers is they do bring in revenue. That the revenue you get from ads is much higher than anything you can get online. So it's good to have, you know, it's worthwhile having a newspaper if you have a big enough circulation to have enough advertisers. But the thing is the model is broken. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, next question. Who's next? Who wants to be next? In the front.
Khotsong, I am Bula, and I wanted to ask the question, particularly with, as well, we said publications like Currency, when you go online, you're not just competing nationally, you are competing globally. The newsroom, and I think we've had the conversation as well in the last couple of days, that newsrooms unfunded in journalism is largely unattractive compared to other career paths. And so this is not just a newsroom conversation, but it's also a journalist's conversation. Now, part of the challenge around this is the social media companies like Meta and others that contribute to newsrooms emptying out. We've seen other countries holding such companies to account, and policies put in place, quote unquote, in some ways go to war to say you aren't allowed to function in the country until you come to some kind of agreement with government. Now, should South Africa or the South African government be doing something similar? Would this help publications on stage and others? Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. I mean, I wouldn't be too hostile to the US social media companies. We might have a coup here, you know. But yeah, look, I mean, that's what the Competition Commission inquiry is about, as far as I can understand. And you're talking about the Australian legislation. Canada has tried something similar. it's still fairly fluid. There's always the prospect that the social media companies will say, well, fine, we'll just close down and we'll see how your citizens feel about that. Or we won't link to any news at all. So that's fine, but that means that all the news publications who rely on getting traffic from social media are punished. So I think it's quite a complex question, not one that's going to be answered easily. I think that we have people in the audience who might be able to answer that better than, but if any of the participants would like to answer.
May I? Okay, so last year, I was part of a delegation, an AIP publisher delegation to the US. And we found that the US media is basically held up by community newspapers. All right. So you'll find that what I found is that, like the towns would have, there is a commitment from business. There's a commitment from the local council to ensure that those newspapers thrive. So I get what the speaker said. That would be great if we could get the government and local government to come in and legislate such a thing. There should be. We need our local voices.
Not social media. Yeah. Good. Another question? Yeah, please, the guy.
Okay, my name is Christo Morolong. I think it's a tricky question I want to ask to the panel, especially Shelley. You're mentioning alternative funding models, and would you? And I mean, I'm listening to you coming much more from an activist, background. Would you look into probably politics? Having started your own political organization. I mean, Zila was a journalist before she was in DA. She's the one who broke Steve Biko's story that he died in detention. And Daily Maverick, they're sitting at, you guys are sitting at 30,000 subscribers and readers. Members. If people were to vote for you, surely you could get a seat in parliament, Yeah, so looking at, and you mentioned events, the IDP sessions in Bezos, which government normally does, and there's a budget for that, Would you maybe then take up that? There's issues now, water issues in Lenasia, currently. And those are, I think that's a very tricky question.
Yeah, to be honest, I die-hard ANC activist over the years, and I got so frustrated. Because as a newspaper, we were doing all the councillors' work. So somebody had a burst pipe, we were logging calls with Joburg Water. And so eventually, when the DA came to me, I accepted their offer to stand as a local councillor for Ward 120. And that was out of sheer frustration. I am not a politician. I don't even like that world. It's just far too toxic for me. So, but anyway, I didn't win the election. It was the second highest votes in the area. But I would not do it again. I just found it compromised me in some way. I don't know what it was, but I don't mind doing the eventing for whoever it may be, as long as I'm getting paid for that. I'm not taking party sides, even if I'm hosting something like that or organizing it. But I personally won't. I've been there, done that, and I can't.
In order for democracy to function, you need a viable press. And if we all sign up to be politicians, then we are not going to be servicing our needs of our audience.
Yeah. And I think I disappointed a lot of people when I did that. They thought I was very capable, but I betrayed where I come from. So I saw that, and it affected my newspaper.
Other questions?
Yeah. Hi.
Who's got the mic?
Oh, yeah, I was.
Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm Simon. I'm a colleague to Shelley. I'm also a member of AIP. I think one addition that I just need to mention, when we say community media, in our profiles of the printers of our publishers that we actually have communities, religious communities. We have a spectrum of languages across the 11 languages. So in response to the gentleman earlier to say that, how can you fit into one system? A vendor rural newspaper is a standalone in that community. So it's really difficult to rally national resources when you are a Sotho paper based in a certain community. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And when we say communities, there is even a publication that focuses just solely on Muslim as a religion news. Then there's a KZN paper that focuses on religion only. So those isolated like communities, how do you rally that voice together? That's quite the challenge. But we are representative of the 11 languages across the spectrum, and we don't necessarily fit into the national news stream in some cases, because one will be some language, maybe a Hottentot, in the Northern Cape, and they serve that particular community very well. So that becomes the challenge.
Kate? Stay out of politics.
Yeah, so yeah. So it's more comment, but it's just picking up on what Shirley's been saying and Simon, and just the idea that I think that one of the things that I do think that we potentially have a lot of power with is collective services. And I think that, I thought what Shirley was saying was very powerful about the fact that, we've got a lot of copy. So that's not the problem. It's really is the funding. And one of the things that we're working on as AIP is in fact, some kind of advertising agency, some kind of mechanism to actually get advertising into our publications, at a kind of national level, and also at a kind of provincial level. And I loved your idea about advertorials. I think it's brilliant. So it's being a bit more. It's not just about putting straight adverts into publications, but also advertorials. I mean, there are tons of development organizations. There are tons of various corporates and things that want to put across various messages. And it's thinking creatively around how to get that out there. But the thing which I think is interesting is that people often say, well, we're going to give you all of this information, but just cover it for free. And we're like, no, actually, we're not going to cover it for free. Like, you're getting a huge amount of benefit out of us putting it into our publications, translating it, and we translate it into the particular dialects of our particular areas. And so we're saying that's what we want to do. So I think we really struggled with advertising, absolutely. But I think there's something interesting there. And it's just to put that out there, and just to also ask people on the panel, what do they think, in terms of that kind of collective power of advertising? And maybe, as I say, thinking a bit more creatively, and maybe just one last tiny point, just this idea of, potentially also this collaboration between the media in terms of putting on an event, and bringing the corporates and getting funding in that way. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. That's an interesting thought. A monopsony is the economics term. What does the panel think of collective efforts at advertising? Bringing in advertising.
I think there's definitely potential in that. If you think of advertorials of a Department of Health that wants to reach a broader readership, and the community-based newspaper is that place that's going to be able to reach right down to grassroots. And so if you had a public service advertorial that needed to go out, let's say it's COVID, and you're trying to get your messaging out, that is a viable option, to do it as a collective, and you put together your pricing models because you've got 150 publications that this can go into. Definitely worth pursuing.
I think
yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's a great idea as well. I think that coming from a group of publications that all shared an advertising department, it needs to be well managed, as opposed to the largest publications always getting the bulk of it, and advertising people saying, well, this publication will get the most, and then this, and it needs to be very well managed, but I think it's very promising. We've seen talk about readers don't want to pay. I think the advertisers are used to getting stuff for free. They thought the digital world means, content is now, people want content, so they'll, I think some of the retailers they'll say, write about our wine for us. Now there's zero public interest in that. And mate, why don't you just advertise for us? No, we want the coverage for free because they got used to it. So I think it's educating the advertisers about their responsibility in this, which is also important.
Shirley?
Yeah, I've gotten so tired of everybody expecting us to do things for free. And so I now stop. I won't do it. I can't have a news channel coming to me and saying, listen, can you do that? I can't. I'm trying to pay salaries right now. And you've got this huge corporation that you're running. So no, everybody must pay for everything. The one thing I want to mention quickly is that when we went to Ohio, you've got the Ohio News Media Association, but every association had its own advertising arm. So it was a fair play. There's no, obviously there was a newspaper in wherever it was, they would get that ad, or those newspapers would share those I would think, the ad spend. So that would help if these association, the advertising is attached to organizations perhaps. So there's some level of transparency, is it centralized? Otherwise it just becomes a nightmare.
All you have to do is vote for Trump and then you got the advertising.
So we have one more question and then I want to wrap up.
My concern, or rather question, is about it seems that all the panelists there seem to represent individual or free market kind of ideas. Where's the other media when I heard Kate talk about collectivists, I was thinking she was going to talk about some of the old ideas of collectivists. But I wanted to just ask this question then, is that why is it that you would have trade union investment money going in to support Prime Media, trade union investment money supporting ENCA, and then I think at the same time there's a decline of internal communication with their own members, So other visions, I mean, if you like, El Salto in Spain or The Intercept and others have subscription-based, but they do investigative stuff, so 60% maybe subscription and other founding models. But where's the collective conversations? Because if everyone is just trying to survive and going inwards, where's this? And I thought SABC were going to be part of the conversation because, I tried to call in once in the SABC. They say, sorry, you can't intervene on that. It's a paid-for advert,
Anybody have any ideas? We need to pay. Unfortunately, being a journalist is a vow of poverty, like being a monk, but you still need to get paid. So we need to find some way of raising money. And there are if you take the investigative unit like Amabungani, it's completely donor funded, and also has some ordinary people paying money, by the way, prepared to pay money. So there is that place, and particularly in the digital space, it makes it much easier to do that because you don't have the overheads of raising money for a newspaper. But I think you're right. The collective. We need to think about that, but then, there's also the party political aspect as well. Isaac?
Thanks. My name is Isaac Manar. I want to say something on behalf of SANEF first, and then on behalf of somebody else. Firstly, SANEF just completed what is called the Community Media Digitization Drive, which was an effort to assist 50 newsrooms, community media newsrooms, print and broadcast, to try and develop new digital futures for them, or at least parallel digital options. It's been fairly successful. Most of the participants actually came out better than when they started. But what's interesting is that we also established a community media support services website, communitymss.co.za, I think, where with the objective of providing services like web development, web hosting, hopefully in the future, what Shirley talked about, maybe advertising streams to different newsrooms, and a whole range of other services. We now, together with Mediate Media, who did this, we're now looking for funding for a further 15 or 30 or so. And I think this kind of initiative to try and just do something and make sure that we move forward is quite important. And I would love to hear also what the panel says about this kind of collaboration and if it would be useful. Secondly, I want to say on behalf of the African Investigative Journalism Conference that starts in 10 days' time at WITS, that there's going to be quite a number of sessions on funding for journalism. And also how to pitch for funding. And most or many of the global media development funders will be at the conference. So it may be a good opportunity to have chats with some of those people. Thank you.
Panel want to react?
I mean, I could just say that I think that we started, and it was really useful to be part of the Amplify cohort. I think it's good to have groups of people who know how things are done and how to start. So that's fabulous. I mean, you know, we didn't know how to do. We have one person on our group who literally still uses DVDs, for whom, you know, the internet world is something completely. So it's fantastic to share those kind of lessons and what not to do. So I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, just to add to what Rob says, I mean, if each one teaches one, suddenly the information gets further along, and we don't all have to make the same mistakes to get ahead if we just start sharing information. I think it's the media for too long has been divided amongst ourselves. Yes, healthy competition needs to be there, but at the end of the day, a viable, strong, diverse media is better for all of us in the end. And so if we can help each other, if we can help Rob start Currency and give him a boost and it's better for all of us. As much as we're all trying to survive, I think the more of us that do survive, the better our country will be.
I just want to say that I wish somebody would write all of these things down. We're having all these conversations. It's happening. Every webinar I attend is about sustainability. The Nordic countries, everybody's done it already. They're still having it, yes. But can we just all get together, or somebody starts, we collate all this information. You know, I have, thanks to my association with the Solutions Journalism Network, I meet and I'm in webinars with a range of international organizations. And there's so much we can learn from them. They've been there, they've had these conversations already. So it's good, I love that we're having this conversation. But we can also look elsewhere, not necessarily in our own ecosystem. Let's look out there and see and put those ideas together, and then we can tailor sustainability options and pathways that matter to in our own spaces.
Well, thanks very much, Shirley. I'm glad you mentioned solutions journalism, because as people were talking, I was thinking, you know about this stuff. Can't you assign somebody to do an article with the solutions journalism frame to actually talk about the sustainability of the media? And I absolutely agree with you. We need to bring these ideas together, and we need to see how they apply to South Africa, because there's lots of stuff being written, but it's all over the place, and we've kind of forgotten about that. And if anybody pays me, I'll do the research. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much. I'd like to not to stay our welcome, but thanks very much to the guests. I enjoyed this immensely. I think it was really useful, and we should do it again. Thanks. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Bye. Take a picture of you. Right.
Good evening. So we'll do some pictures of the panel, but this is the final event of the Media Freedom Festival for 2024. Are we going to give them those now? Okay, good idea. Can you bring them? These are early Christmas gifts, as you can tell. So over the last 3 days, we've had 9 events. Whoops. Don't give that man another beer. We've had 9 events in 3 days, which has been pretty amazing. We started looking at, with the launch of a report, looking at the state of freedom of expression, which was about concerning issues in South Africa. We have had 3 intimate sessions. The one today was around an online integrity ombud. Yesterday we had some very traumatic but very powerful conversations with some women journalists about what it's like being a woman and dealing with mental health in the newsroom. We've had discussions on hate speech. We've had discussions on the Media Freedom Coalition. We've had discussions on all manner of things that are going to help us protect and understand what media freedom means in South Africa. So this evening, because I know we're all anxious to get out and listen to the band and have some drinks, I'm going to just say thank you to all of the partners that made this year's Media Freedom Festival possible. And as you can see, there were a lot of them, and this just gives you some idea of meaning of collective action, right? So we want to thank our friends at the German Embassy, the Campaign for Freedom of Expression, AIP, SANEF, the GCIS, Goethe Institute, SOS Coalition, SABC, and the Press Council. And of course, our team at Media Monitoring Africa. So that's pretty amazing to have done all of this in 3 days, I think. On a direct level, I need to thank very numbers of my team, who are all running very low on batteries despite the number of Red Bulls that they've been having. To Browser, the Gen Zs, Bokazi and Kia, and Tabiseng, and Tombi, Musa, Lister, and Sako, Msizi, Jacques, Tumelo, Sharks, George, Wella. To Noor, to Violent, and Nyakalo, our newest member who adds to our team in various ways. To the sound team, thank you very much, and to all our vendors, and then a huge thanks to all of our speakers, our guests, our friends, and our colleagues. And then finally, a thanks to someone who's not going to be with us next year in this particular role. I hope she'll be here again next year in a slightly different role, to Nomsharo Handel, as we commonly know her. You'll be deeply missed, Handel, and your presence will be felt for a long time. With that, this is the end of the Media Freedom Festival. Piriana! Can we get some pictures of our panel and then you can have drinks?